All right, we're back here again in the video store.
Yep.
All right, we are here to talk about a absolutely haunting, dynamic thriller. That's one of your picks.
Yep.
John Frankenheimer's Seconds.
It was not a film I knew about. I'd heard of probably the only Frankenheimer film I really kind of knew or was aware of when I moved to New York City was Manchurian Candidate and maybe French Connection 2.
Yep.
Just because they're part of the the zeitgeist. But it's like, yeah, I think I'm trying to remember who mentioned it to me. It might have been Tony. It might have been Eric. I can't really remember. But it was just there's nothing like it. It's psychologically so compelling. And it's one of those movies where it's a special collaboration between a visionary director and one of the best cinematographers of all time.
Yep.
And just a pioneer in black and white cinematography. So the two, and Frankenheimer loved making those 60s black and white films.
Yeah.
So for these two to just like create this masterpiece is, it's really just, I think it had an effect on a lot of future filmmakers.
For sure.
Lynch, Fincher.
Yep.
Just, I mean, I was reading that it's actually known as like the Paranoia trilogy, this Manchurian Candidate, 7 Days in May.
Right.
And for someone like Fincher who has become an expert in paranoia-laden worlds, I think it absolutely had to have affected him.
Right. It's one of those, he does this all the time where, with those three films, because it happened to me with Manchurian Candidate, it happened to me with Seconds, and of what I've seen of 7 Days in May, because I haven't seen the whole movie.
Neither have I.
It felt like, it's both of its time, but is so modern and just the dynamic range of just the camera work and something about it. It just seems like it could be made yesterday, but it's still seeped in the
culture of the time.
Yes.
He's not afraid to take risks.
No.
And I think that is just, it can either be end on the side of masterpiece, or it can be Island of Dr. Moreau, one of the most maligned films of all time. Although I think that had a different director, right? And he came in basically to coach a team that was already in shambles.
Right. So it's kind of not fair to
right. But he made a lot of films, and I'd say only about 7 are considered classics.
It's a shame that his last 3 films are Island of Dr. Moreau, Ronin, and
I do like
Reindeer Games.
I do like Ronin.
I have a soft spot for it too, but it's not.
Yeah, and I have a soft spot for Reindeer Games. Like, the guy knew how to make an entertaining film, right? Yeah. And so, I mean, Ronin is one of those films where it was almost like a gimmick saying the best car chases since Bullet or whatever. Like, it was almost like trying to make that an entire set piece of its own. Right. But it's like I felt like Bullet wasn't like aware of itself like that.
Yes.
They were just trying to make like a badass detective movie, and in the middle of it was this gigantic set piece of all set pieces, you know.
But watching Seconds again, I was kind of, because I was referencing things. I was like, wow, you know, the way he's introduced to the corporation or the business. I'm like thinking about The Game.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought of The Game and Total Recall. I thought of when he's pitching him the different realities,
or even like Vanilla Sky or Oblate.
Anything with that motif.
Yes.
Yeah.
But also it's like it I remember in, you know, whatever it is, 1998, 1999, seeing Requiem for a Dream and being like, wow, Darren Aronofsky, he's so innovative with the camera work, the strapping the camera to the person and walking.
Right.
And then you see this and you're like, wow,
I thought of Spike
30
Lee
years
too.
ago.
The whole person on the dolly
Right.
thing.
Right.
I definitely thought of that immediately.
But he has such a, Frankenheimer has such a way of like, it's never showing off for showing off's sake.
Right.
It's really there to just put you into the atmosphere.
Well, there's no, we've talked on this show before about not doing something for no reason. Otherwise, it's like superfluous. It's like just because something looks good is not a reason to use it. Like, there should be some fundamental reason for its being there. And it never feels like he's showing off, like you said. I mean, it's, and yet it's show-off worthy. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's very impressive.
Yes.
And James Wong Howe was nominated,
as he should
deservedly
have
so.
been,
I mean,
should have been. The other thing that I'm very grateful to him as a filmmaker, especially with this film, is that he always errs on the side of ambiguity.
That's great. A great way to put it.
And you feel like there would be so much, like he'd have to explain so much about why this company was started, why he decides to do it, why.
Well, you accomplish it through confident storytelling. He gets a call. He shows all the mundane parts of his existence, the fractured marriage, and then that scene in the den when he's nervously smoking a cigarette and like eyeing the phone and like, I don't know, you just feel the palpable tension. And it's just, it really did kind of birth that feeling of white-knuckled, like this new kind of like, oh man. And then there was, Alan J. Pakula, like there's definitely been filmmakers that kind of took that, like Rains, the 70s was a whole, it was like the paranoid decade,
But there's something else going on, because I was watching it and it was hitting me on such an emotional level watching it again. Just thinking about, as a thriller, it's very thrilling.
Right.
It's got science fiction elements and all this stuff, but I'm sitting there and I'm watching it and I'm like, because it's not telling me anything about, again, the why, which I appreciated, because now I could just put whatever I want onto it. And all these, the thoughts about, I did some reading on the booklet, I guess, has for the Criterion release, there's a booklet and there's an essay by David Sterrett, and reading it, it's like it's this real kind of attack on consumer culture and capitalism in such a way as like, it's going to sell you, your life's going to be so much better if you're younger, your life's going to be so much better if you look a certain way.
The idea of capitalism having a built-in assuaging of any problem you might have, you can solve it by going out and spending your money. Right. And
so he does so, and then as everyone encounters who goes off and has this midlife crisis or has these thoughts, it's like your problems are going to follow you, man.
Right.
It's not going to fix it. And the scene between Murray Hamilton's scene at the end.
He plays Charlie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And great. And there's so much going on in that scene.
That room is straight out of Kafka.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, it's like, you read about this, it's like there's obviously comparisons to Kafka, but that scene in particular, the fact that no one's talking to him, this underlying conspiratorial air of the trick being played on you, and that all is not what you think it is, that whole predominant theme in Kafka's work is just like all over that scene. But what were you saying about?
So one, like, because I know Murray Hamilton from Jaws and The Graduate, I knew his voice. So
like as soon as he calls,
I'm like, oh, that's Murray Hamilton.
Right.
And then I'm waiting, and he's got the one scene where he doesn't talk to him, but he just sees him. But that last scene, man, and I mean, it's such a good performance, because just in that one little scene, like he runs the gamut of emotion, and the way he's so happy for him, like, and then when he gets called, and the tears that are running down it. I mean,
Does he
there's
know?
just something
Does
going
he
on.
know that he's heading to his death?
No. And
But
that's
is he heading to a second chance,
Right.
or is this? I mean, it's really that's the built-in ambiguity that you're talking about, though. It's so effective.
And it also triggers you. You know, the first time you watch that scene, it doesn't really register, right? Why he's crying,
because you don't have all the
you
don't have the answers,
right? And then watching it the second time, that scene, I don't know, whatever it was, just jumped out at me and just hit me like so on such an emotional level. And then the whole way that he shoots him. I mean, it reminded me of Terry Gilliam in Brazil. Like,
here's another filmmaker that was probably inspired.
But that wide angle shot of him on the gurney being taken down that long hallway.
Oh yeah, and when is it Will Geer that plays?
He's something.
When he's one of the best. If Rock Hudson wasn't giving the performance of his life in this, it would be him.
Right.
When he says. When they secure the strap and he goes, it's just to make sure you don't fall off.
Yeah.
There's something so sinister and insidious about the way he says that with a smile.
Yeah.
There's many things he's saying, and actually his idealism, his misplaced sense of idealism, is really a nice theme to kind of look at, because it's this idea of like, oh, he says he's going to wage a war on human misery. Right? And it's like, and he taught the irony of his comment where he says, we're constantly trying to improve the system. Oh, the system, not the lives of the clients, right?
Right.
That's trumped by improving the system. By improving the system, it will improve this. It's like this trickle-down effect that, no, you've literally created, and
his performance, I'd be very surprised, because I thought about this movie as well, but I'd be very surprised if it wasn't a back pocket film for Get Out, Jordan Peele.
I mean, I think he's got myriad influences,
because there's such a, this kind of social thriller.
I would have to think that could be the case. Not stylistically.
No, but
like thematically.
Well, the Will Greer character in particular made me think about. Oh my God, he's in everything. Coen Brothers, he plays Milton.
Yeah, the guy who plays the blind photographer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Man, I hate that. I hate myself for not knowing his name right now.
I know, I hear you.
But yeah, it made me think of that, the way he is the ultimate salesman and is going to use his folksy way and the smile and the real selling of his voice and his whole way.
I mean, if
the way he talks about, like, what his dad taught him.
If the devil appeared on Earth, it wouldn't be with a pitchfork and a tail, right? So it's like it's one of those things where I actually going over my notes, I had commented just on how just how sick that shot is, the tracking shot of moving through the rows of cow carcasses leading to the corporation, but it's foreshadowing. It's literally rows of carcasses. It's a death house. It's a slaughterhouse. You're being led through to your own demise, and
in one way
they're
or
just
another.
cattle. I mean, it's pretty amazing. I think the movie is layered with symbolic imagery, much the way that Night of the Hunter is. And you could really, upon multiple rewatches, pick it apart and say, there's this thing I noticed, I don't know if you're a One Car Y fan, but there's a distinct 2046 on a door, the number of a door. And it was always just such a random number to call a film, right? That I just was like, oh man, like I wonder if that just struck him. He's up late watching Seconds, and he's just like, something about that number means something to him, Yeah, just love that kind of stuff.
The comparison to Night of the Hunter is very astute, and likewise with this film not getting, I mean, it did not do
well.
didn't do well at
But
all.
future cult classic.
Yeah, and even the critical mass didn't go
Yeah,
for it.
it was, and actually I was a little bit annoyed that this one guy was like saying, though this would have been a superb horror film if it wasn't for Rock Hudson's casting, and it's like,
If you do not appreciate how well Rock Hudson does in this movie, then I
dude,
don't know what
apparently
you're...
he spent time with the other actor learning his mannerisms before they even started shooting.
Well, not only that, but that it was, supposedly it was his idea to cast 2 different actors. And he doesn't show up until 40 minutes into the movie.
He's also 5 inches taller than the other actors, so they shot things to make it look. But he really, you feel like he's inside someone else's skin, right? I mean, it's just, it's remarkable.
Mm-hmm. And there's so many. There was another critic who was saying that he didn't like how claustrophobic everything was, that's the
key to the whole picture.
That's the virtue to the whole movie, and I love that. It's one of those movies where you appreciate. Oh, I love, because you could read the synopsis and you could, just from the first 10 minutes thinking about what's going to be happening, what's going to be coming, and you could think, oh, this must get so convoluted, and there must be so many different locations and characters and whatnot. No, it's really probably 4 or 5 different locations, mostly being shot at this beach house.
Which is Frankenheimer's own home, by the way, which is pretty cool.
And the imagery, all the imagery and just the scenes that come from that, and him meeting the woman on the... And maybe it is because I hadn't seen it in a while, and this was my second time seeing it. You feel the plot that's going on underneath his nose, where it's like, of course she's one also, the way she's addressing.
And at first you think she's another second.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And in fact, having watched it, when I rewatched it after all this time, it was almost like I was watching it for the first time again.
Right.
So when he first meets her, it occurred to me, I wonder if she's just like him.
And then you realize she's the only one that's not, supposedly. But also and this is another thing that it's both of its time, but so modern in when they go to the the grape smashing.
Yeah, which was not in the original theatrical version.
Oh.
No, when it was added to the DVD.
Wow.
By Frankenheimer, and in fact there was a scene he wanted to add where he goes and talks to his daughter that they couldn't find the footage. But that's crazy to me, because that is really the terror that he feels when he's fully submerged in that wine.
And and the other thing about that scene too is, I don't know, it hit me, and we're like-minded people in that we're introspective, we're quiet, we don't really like crowds when crowds get out of hand.
Right.
I felt so much for him. And when she jumps in, that feeling of I don't want to be here.
His acting is superb in that scene, and because you see the fear written all over his face, but then also he takes the time to to fake smile at someone.
Right.
I'm like, oh man, that is some next level. It makes me think of Gene Hackman in Unforgiven in this one scene, Hayden Christensen in Shattered Glass. It's having the panoramic understanding of a scene enough to realize what someone would naturally do in that situation socially.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, these uncontrolled social tics or whatever, it's just really brilliant. It's on some next level.
Just gave me goosebumps. I'm just thinking, because I did notice that when I saw it. I was like,
it's 1 second.
Yeah, it's like,
right. Yeah, it's really, and it fuels, man, it's really great.
Yeah.
You know what other movie I think this might have helped birth is American Beauty. We're introduced to this milquetoast of a man who is constantly stepped on. He does not have the respect of his wife. He does not have the respect of his daughter.
Sure.
I mean, his boss.
Yeah.
No one, right?
And then he gets a second life, a second book. Yeah.
And which ultimately leads to his demise.
Right.
Right. So I think it's got to be. It's the lifeblood of the whole picture. If you can describe a movie, it's sort of like, I know that it's acknowledged that Star Wars is from Hidden Fortress, but the way I always put it to people is like, I describe the plot of Hidden Fortress, and it's basically the plot to Star Wars. So it's like, if you can just superimpose something over something, it's still an accomplishment in itself, but it definitely had some help, right?
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
The other film that I thought of too, and this might, it may be a stretch or it's not, but I think it's both a film that is inspired by it, but also a film that, as much as I love it and appreciate it, does what doesn't follow the ambiguity thing, and that's Inception. Because it works on a completely emotional level as well as an entertaining level. Deals with the same type of imagery and this kind of dream nightmare logic,
Right.
but also, unlike this movie, explains a lot. And sometimes to the detriment of that film, where that film doesn't work for me so much, is when I feel like they're just trying to over-explain.
I mean, Nolan is more on the Spielberg side of things than the Frankenheimer, right? I mean, he wants you, even in a movie like Memento, where ambiguity would seem to be its closest friend. There's definitely like an order. He's a very order conscious director. Right. And sometimes it's, the best thing there is, because it's like, but yeah, ambiguity is one of those things where it can help or it can hurt, depending on the situation. But those who know how to really use it well that's what they're known for. I just know like so much, like every moment when I'm rewatching this movie, how appreciative I was of it, and just and thinking of the fact that scene with Murray Hamilton could have been that scene. It could have been that scene where it's like, don't you understand? This is why I did this for you, and like going on this whole thing. How painful is the scene when he goes to talk to his wife? Oh. It's soul crippling. It's like to hear. It's one of those things where everyone has thought about, what if I could be a fly on the wall at my own funeral? Would people really be torn up about losing? Like, it's that thing. It's that put yourself in that position. Right. And when you're in this type of a marriage, it's like, when pressed, what does my wife really think of me? Right. What does she think my biggest flaw is? Am I even aware of it? Or am I aware of it so much that I hate? Her lasting impression of him is his quietness. Yeah. Which scares the shit out of me if it doesn't scare the shit out of you. Oh my God. They're reading about this on Wikipedia was a lot of fun, because there are just some nuggets, man. Have you heard about the Brian Wilson Beach Boys thing? No. Dude. So apparently Brian Wilson went to a screening of this when it first came out, and so he when he first hears the line, "Come on in, Mr. Wilson," he like looks up, and Phil Spector was a rival of his, and was one of the financial contributors to the film. He thinks that Phil Spector basically used this to mess with him. Wow. And because it's like to kind of, because of his recent just some recent traumatic experiences that he'd had and intellectual pursuits and things like that, it was like not like really trying to mess with him. And he even was quoted as saying, they even managed to put the beach in there. There's a whole thing at the beach. Like, wow. Wilson, beach, and it's, who knows, it's like Room 237, right? Yeah. Where it's like you could start finding all these parallels, but he did not go to another movie until 1982 when he went to E.T. He didn't enter a movie theater for that period of time, and he canceled the album they were working on because apparently he was so frightened. Who knows? It's definitely one of those things. But I was like, man, I can't believe there's so much mythology about quote unquote little film like this that really, yeah, it's pretty cool.
And after seeing Love and Mercy, you believe that.
I mean, he had a lot of paranoia and his own kind of emotional turmoil.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was very interesting.
I thought a lot about, I mean, it's hard to not, but I thought a lot about Hitchcock with this, and that there's been comparisons to Vertigo, which I think are good because both films work on a both films, the subtext is the text.
When was Vertigo released?
58.
I don't think it's a coincidence that he used Saul Bass for the title.
Yep, which is amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, just looking at Saul Bass's resume for the posters he designed, the iconic nature of his titles, like West Side Story, like Otto Preminger's whole art theme. I mean, he has got to be the GOAT of artistic design in film titles and posters, absolutely.
And what's cool is that there's also stories about like Martin Scorsese, James L. Brooks, Spielberg, like
right, because he did Goodfellas, Casino. He did the titles for
But he's the one that like
Broadcast News.
Yeah, he was the one that in Broadcast News, I guess, he gives Saul Bass a credit because he came up at the end of the movie. It just kind of like either faded out or it went to black, and he's like, you should do something really innovative where because it's about TV, the screen should just keep collapsing down into a TV screen. And he's like, wow, thank you. And he just gives him credit.
I mean, something
is, he's like, how should my title come onto the screen? He's like, it should blast across the screen like that, because it's like a bullet from a gun.
I mean, something as simple as big.
Yeah.
But how effective? Because it was all lowercase letters, right?
Yes.
Just these red lowercase letters. Yep. That less is more aesthetic. Awesome. But Hitchcock.
Yeah. And all throughout the movie, because again, like with Vertigo, the subtext is the text, and it's not a movie. If you're watching this movie and asking yourself, the logic questions of like, well, how could they actually do something like this, or why are they doing this? Why is this company even? The movie's not working for you, and you're not.
Right. The
movie's not for you if you're asking those questions. But if you just sit down and let the movie emotionally wash over you, and you connect with it on that level, it's so great and rewarding, and the use of the camera work and just the use of even the opening scene reminded me of the opening of Strangers on a Train, where you got these two shoes going.
The art director did Strangers on a Train.
Nice.
As well as, I just got to read this because I Confess, Marty, Some Like It Hot, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, Jeremiah Johnson, Junior Bonner, The Getaway, Harry and Tonto. And I mean, and also I want to comment about the editing, because the transitions, man, I mean, there's two in particular that really stand out to me. One is when he's signing the contract, his finger becomes the knife. It literally, it's a jump cut to the knife penetrating his skin.
Wow.
The pen becomes the knife.
Wow.
And he's literally signing his life away. So it like shows you this, it's really smart. And then later, the final transition from the white glare of the fluorescent bulb becoming the beach. And then he does that, I think it's the thing that Saul Bass did of manipulating the optical image. Yeah. The two editors worked on this, and one in particular, one of them, he wrote the screenplay for John Borman's Point Blank. The editor, the only movie he wrote. And then the other editor, Ferris Webster, Blackboard Jungle, Forbidden Planet, High Plains Drifter, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Magnificent Seven, Manchurian Candidate, Great Escape, Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, Outlaw Josie Wales, Escape from Alcatraz. Amazing. Not to mention Jerry Goldsmith and James Wong Howe, right?
Yeah.
You got these like someone like James Wong Howe who literally started working for Joseph von Sternberg, and then like 5 decades worth of movies.
Right.
But I mean, this is definitely one of those where it's a product of brilliant minds, all collaborating.
And that Jerry Goldsmith score, just from that opening, that Saul Bass opening, you just know you're in for something. And
isn't this something you'd love to have on vinyl?
Yes.
I would love to have that soundtrack in the background.
Yeah.
It's melancholy, it's menacing, it's all kinds of things.
It's like a Bernard Herrmann score.
Moody. Yeah. His Goldsmith score for Chinatown may be my favorite score of all time.
Well, I mean,
there's something about it.
It's crazy because it's like, this, Chinatown, Alien, you could stop there.
Right.
In terms of soundtracks that you'd buy the album just to have the music and listen to the music, right? But yet it complements the movie so well.
I think one of the biggest things about him is, you've got these composers that sort of like duplicate themselves a little bit, like John Williams and Alan Silvestri, and like they're great.
Yeah.
It's just that they
have their niche.
They have their thing. They do, right? Goldsmith, it's like there's no rhyme or reason to it. He looks at every film like its own, like he has to decode what is going to be necessary for this film to have the distinct atmosphere that it needs. It's really brilliant.
It's like the story I heard about the whoever did the sound design for both Raging Bull and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, in that every movie he'd do the sound design and then he would dump it, and
because he didn't want to use generic.
He never wanted to use the
effects.
same sound twice
Right.
for the same movie, because each movie was its own thing. And he'd never tell, like Scorsese was like, well, how did you do, like, what's that sound? He's like, I'm not telling you that.
That's great.
But yeah, I mean, the soundtrack for Inner Space does not sound like the soundtrack for this.
True. Yeah.
And it's and they're both big, great dynamic scores.
He might be my favorite composer in film.
Did Roger Ebert review this?
I have not.
Because I tried to look for it and I didn't find it, which is odd. I wanted to know what he thought.
Yeah.
It must be very. I can't help but think, because he had his career in the '60s, which was so. There's such great movies, and then it feels like.
I'm behind on. It's interesting. I was fortunate enough to have lived in New York City and been a member of the Film Forum. It was a pretty sweet deal. It was like you pay $60 for the year, and then you only have to pay $5 per movie. And then they did a Frankenheimer retrospective, and I got to see in the theater Young Savages, Birdman of Alcatraz, Seconds, Manchurian Candidate.
What the hell was this movie like on the big screen, man?
Amazing. Yeah. Haunting.
Jesus Christ.
I mean, it's like, yeah, but I mean, those claustrophobic moments are closing in on you. I was powerfully affected by two films in particular, The Young Savages and Birdman of Alcatraz, for different reasons. The style, the sense of style that Young Savages has.
Young Savages is Marlon Brando. Right?
No, Burt Lancaster.
What am I thinking of? Young Lions. Sorry.
Yeah, Young Savages, man. It's black and white. It's got such a sense of style. It's well acted. It's really great. But then the Birdman of Alcatraz has one of the best performances of all time by Burt Lancaster, and it's such a quiet little film that it really shows you Frankenheimer's range.
Was that
as a director.
76?
62.
Birdman of Alcatraz?
Yeah.
See, so that's the thing. Like, it's like, I would
Escape from Alcatraz might have been 76.
That's the thing. So, and then Young Savages is when?
I think maybe like 60. That might have been late 50s.
Okay. So you get these films.
Or early
He
60s.
makes such a impact. Those films, Manchurian Candidate, The Train, which is one of
that I haven't seen.
Oh my God, it's such a great, like one of the great action
That's what I've
movies
heard.
of the '60s. Yeah. And then he makes this film, which by all accounts, we look at it now and it's like, wow, that's his masterpiece. And it
Which one? Seconds?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it does, and terrible business, critically panned. I wonder if it affected him, because the movies he makes after this
and changed his trajectory.
Yes.
Right, and
Yes.
forced him to think that he needed to change.
Yes.
God, it's really sad, and Van Gogh comes to mind again, where it's like, here's someone who didn't care, like, he was concerned, but he didn't let it, he still stayed true to his purpose.
Right.
And yeah, that's a very good point, because that very well might have been what led to Reindeer Games and these kinds of movies, right? I mean,
well, I'm sure there's something in between, but the next movie that I know of that he did was French Connection 2, right? Which, may on its own be a decent movie, but I'm going where I think the money's going to be.
Right.
Or I'm taking a studio job,
yeah,
to do a sequel to a movie that won Best Picture that might do well, because the last movie
like
that
just
won
on
Best
name
Picture,
recognition alone, right?
But the last movie that won Best Picture was The Godfather Part 2, which was, a sequel to an Oscar-winning film that.
Right.
So it's hard. It struck me after watching it and kind of thinking about it and looking back at his filmography. It was like, is this the one that affected him so much?
Because he must have been so proud of it.
You would
right?
think.
I mean,
yeah, you'd have to, and that he put himself he put himself out there, and did something that was a little bit more emotional, a little bit more poetic. I mean, it is a tone poem. I mean, that last shot is, it's whatever you want it to be, right?
And that's why this is once again another quintessential back pocket film, because it didn't do well. It wasn't that well received. Yet it clearly affected all these future filmmakers. So it actually, you can see the cultural reverberations and artistic reverberations in the pool of its wake, right? So it's like really cool to just see and just be able to just feel the stylistic effects that it had on people that were commercially successful filmmakers, right? It's like,
right. And if you're not influenced by it, or you don't know about it, it's a movie that you have to watch, and you're just going to get stunned again.
And that's why this show exists, to give people that opportunity to see something like this that they just don't even know is there. It's like, and once again, it's like what I felt when someone put it in my hand and said, "Watch this."
Right.
I mean,
and you go back and you're like, "Thank you."
Yeah.
and as they always do, the Criterion Collection edition of this is
Blu-ray.
Yeah, and it's
I can
amazing
imagine.
transfer.
Right.
You really get to soak in that cinematography and the atmosphere that he creates. And I know we talked about it, but I mean, it's got to be said again. If all you know Rock Hudson from is the Doris Day movies or the Douglas Sirk movies, he's on a completely different level.
Yeah.
And he's always he's not terrible in those movies. He's just it's a.
It goes with the territory.
Yes.
It is what it is. It's like he's not going to do more than is called for.
Right.
Right.
But I mean, we're going to later on we're going to look at Magnificent Obsession, and we'll see another Rock Hudson performance that is just as good. But with this, it's just on a completely different level.
There's a use of specificity in this movie that is worth noting, of just like little things like we see him at the bank and it sounds like he's talking to a client, right? And he's talking about why they can't get this loan or whatever. And then he gets distracted when he's thinking about this phone call, and you realize he's actually just talking to, a secretary and like dictating a letter, right? And it's like it's brilliant because you're sort of sucked into this idea that it's like, oh, you feel bad for the person who's there, and then it's like, oh no, that's not what's happening.
Right.
It's really cool.
Yeah. Hey, did you think about Mad Men at all?
I didn't.
Because that's kind of.
Yeah. Oh God, Don Draper.
Yeah.
Like Second Chance.
Yeah.
Wow. I'd say that has to be on the table. And that's a movie that Don would have gone to.
Right.
Right. Like Don had the coolest film taste. Just like, I mean, that's one of my favorite things about Mad Men is I go to the movies by myself.
Well,
and I totally get that.
When Robin and I first started watching it, and I knew it's like the first or the second season where I knew what the date was, and because I knew it was influenced by this movie, I'm just waiting for someone to say they went to go see The Apartment. I know it's going to happen. Yeah. And then it happens. They're like, oh, I'm going to see the Apartment again. And Robin's next to me. I'm like, I knew they were going to do that.
Yeah.
But it's the fun of that whole show is just.
And doesn't he take his son to see, is it Planet of the Apes? Yep. I mean, it's just, I love the way that show, it's great that it was a TV series and not a movie.
Right.
Because it's one of the most perfect television shows ever, because they never skimp anything. And the ending is amazing. And there's not really a weak episode. It's astonishingly flawless to me. And you could nitpick different things, but I'm like, man, there's so many iconic shows that sort of do get accused of dropping the ball here and there, with maybe like Lost and Sopranos with polarizing endings, right? And or maybe ending too soon or things like that. But it's like, what a great
or a season that isn't up to the standard
like
of
Dexter.
other seasons.
Didn't Dexter start to feel like this is made by a different person?
Yeah,
like
this is not the same.
This
show.
doesn't feel the same, right? And I think there's a preserved sanctity to the integrity of the show, that it's everyone's on the same page, right? And it's kind of cool because John Hamm is an actor like Rock Hudson in a way that people might not think there's much depth to him because of his looks or whatever. So it's like, oh man, you're just this, and it's like, no, there's a tremendous amount of thinking that John Hamm has to do to be able to pull this off, and that's a great comparison, and that's really.
I wish I could claim it. I mean, someone else did.
Oh, someone, but still,
But they were they were doing it because of the production design. But then, as we were talking about Rock Hudson and you saying, I'm like, oh my God, of course, Don Draper and it's got to be.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I would really like to, it would be really cool, it would be long as hell, but to kind of program a day where you can watch Manchurian Candidate, 7 Days in May, and then Seconds.
You know, the Manchurian Candidate remake is very good.
It is. I mean, it's Jonathan Demme,
but he didn't he also do the Charade remake, which was not so hot. But so like it's like I feel like he really found the pulse of what makes that original film work.
Yes.
And says, I'm not going to remake the same movie. Why would I do that? Right. Gus Van Sant. Why, I'm going to pay homage to it, right, and create this new character and this new opportunity for something that's politically resonant to the time. And
which is weird is because it's exactly what he did with The Truth About Charlie, but in one instance it works, in the other instance it doesn't.
Right, and it's very interesting to see the one that works and the one that doesn't, because you can learn a lot about, like, well, let's write a list of why this didn't work and why this does work, and then find the middle ground of what you should and shouldn't do.
Right.
I want to see if there's maybe something I'm neglecting to mention. I love this. Honest Arnie the Used Cow Dealer is the name of that slaughterhouse that he goes to, or the butcher shop, or the butcher factory. I mean, that's just great stuff. And just to like include that name is one of the great things about his filmmaking. Is that's just funny. I mean, and he didn't have to do that, right? You didn't have to show that. It never gets mentioned, right? And then I just love the line, I've been assigned to go over the circumstances of your death with you. Like, there's just so much irony to some of these lines, and they're said so matter-of-factly.
I mean, it's truly terrifying, that ending, the way they are so matter-of-fact about that. And just thinking about how truthful that is about the language that we use.
Well, and that surgeon says, "You were my best work." And I love the details, the kind of subtly sinister details of, like, when the guy who's basically getting him all set up, he says, "Oh, this seems to be your supper. The chicken looks delicious." And then he's just like, "Do you mind?"
Right.
And he starts eating the chicken.
Right.
And, I always remember when people are actually eating in movies, right? Because you've got Chinatown.
Yep.
Brad Pitt, as someone just mentioned to me the other day, Brad Pitt always eating in movies, like chewing something.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that was like his idea in Ocean's 11. He's like, I should have a thing that I do. How about if I'm always eating? But it made me think about in Jaws, when Richard Dreyfuss goes to see Brody and he's there with his wife, and that plate of chicken is right there, and he just stops in and he's just like, "Is anyone eating this?" But it made me think of that, but also the way he's like, they have this thing that they do where they put cheese on it, makes it extra crispy.
I love that line. It's so good. And then in my head, I'm like, that probably does make it.
Like,
I should try that. It's funny that Gremlins, whenever I think of like fried chicken in movies, like cold fried chicken, I think of Gremlins. Like, doesn't he leave like the fried chicken? For the dinner.
And just the way, because and they eat the.
I don't know why that is, but it's just. Isn't it easier to go forward if you know you can't go back? There's just, the screenplay is filled with great dialogue. We actually didn't mention the writing at all, and it was written by Louis John Carlino, who wrote the original The Mechanic and the remake, co-wrote the remake, which is actually a pretty good movie. There's like good Jason Statham movies, bad Jason Statham movies, the two genres. But he also wrote and directed The Great Santini, a great Robert Duvall flick, and wrote a movie called Resurrection that is going to be a future Back Pocket film, which is a kind of a slow burn from '80 with, what's her name from... Oh God, what were you just talking about? Darren Aronofsky film.
Requiem for a Dream.
Yeah,
Ellen Burstyn.
Yes, great Ellen Burstyn performance, and that my friend Sean Foster loved that movie, if I can recall correctly, and it's so just kind of a cool. And then he was nominated for an Oscar for I Never Promised You a Rose Garden, which I haven't seen, but the writing is just as important as anything in this film. When they say to him, they don't need you and you don't need them. So manipulative about his hopes and dreams.
Right.
And then he actually says at one point when he's talking to the guy, the head of the corporation, he goes, I guess I just don't have a dream. Right. It's really, really sad, man.
What's the word he uses to describe his wife? And he keeps saying it.
It's good, like we get along well together or something. It's like they're just companions or something. Like, you know, there's a line when they finish his surgery and they say it's a masterpiece that reminded me of Inglourious Bastards. When he goes, I think this might be my masterpiece. I don't know, it's just a similarly toned and delivered moment. You are alone in the world, absolved of all responsibility except to your own interest. A lot of just like socially relevant things as far as our culture that are spoken of in this. The panic attack on the plane is great. His reaction when she calls him a dirty old man, and oh man, it's great stuff.
Yeah.
And then the name Seconds becomes twofold. So it's not just a second chance. When he's waiting to hear when his next surgery is going to be, the seconds are going, and then it becomes the seconds that are ticking away in his life because his death is imminent. Yep. So, and then just, I thought it operated on a similar thematic territory to The Swimmer. Just the idea of illusions and the perceptions, your reality and fantasy intertwining based on perception. Yeah, that might be.
What is the final shot to you? Is that him and his daughter?
Maybe.
Because it looks to, and this is
maybe that. Yeah, that's his final. It didn't even. God, it didn't even. Sometimes I'm so blunt-headed. Like, I'm just I didn't even think that that's his final thought.
Yeah.
You know, before he dies, it didn't even occur to me. I don't know why. It just like. Sometimes I'm so focused on artistry that I'm not thinking about.
Well, like, and that's the beauty of this movie, man, is that final shot can be whatever you want it to be.
Exactly.
It's a Horseshack. It's a poem. Mm-hmm. But no, I mean, I'm worried that I may have missed something because it looks to me like it's a man carrying a child on his shoulders.
Right.
So my thought was, is that him and his daughter? Is that his final wish or his final thought or his, or him realizing that, that was the dream?
The final thing is, there's this constant motif of rebirth, the idea of rebirth throughout the film, right? When he has the thing strapped around his face and he has the cotton in his mouth, his muffled cries sound identical to a newborn infant. If you listen to it again, it's amazing.
Wow.
I mean, it's so, it was so much so that I was like, there's no way they didn't try to do that. I mean, it was really, and that's where it really is synonymous with Night of the Hunter in how many, like, remember the Night of the Hunter thing where I'm like, I bet you he gets, I bet you it's the hand that says hate that gets, right? So it's like, it's that level of caring that creates something like this, that is that multi-layered onion that you will always find something new.
Every moment is going to count. Every moment is going to mean something.
These films are special.
Yeah.
They really are. Because you've got other films like The Godfather where the density is so massive that it's like, you know, it's fun just to watch the art direction, right? But then there's psychologically compelling and layered movies that are like, wow, like I can't believe how much went into this.
And, you know, this may become the theme of this season, but again, it's a team of people. It's not just Frankenheimer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's what happens when you have a collaboration between people that are making the same movie or just.
That are some of the best people that have ever done their profession.
Yeah.
Right. That's, I think, what is so powerful is you're just witnessing greatness. Right. And it doesn't always happen. Right. Not every movie that these people worked on was a success, and I don't mean monetarily, but like executing what your vision. Right. Right.
But I mean, you can break it down and be like, you know, it's Saul Bass coming in and being like, oh, I know exactly what to do with the opening image. It's Jerry Goldsmith saying like, oh, I got this theme
and it takes
in
so
mind.
much pressure off Frankenheimer to just direct, right? You're just, and that's essentially the name of the profession. And I think sometimes filmmakers that don't have a strong team, they feel like it's the same as a manager that doesn't feel like they have a strong staff. So they end up feeling like they have to, or they don't trust their staff enough to empower them to be able to excel to their level. So it's like, you got to be able to let go and say, I'm in charge of making sure everything is done, but not in charge of every little thing. Mm-hmm. And I think it was just a perfect symmetry of skills coming together. I mean, it's great.
Thanks for picking this, man, because ever since I rented and watched it again, I was just like, man, I forgot how good this movie is.
You should email Mariah about showing this.
Yeah.
Because that would be great to see in the theater.
Right. Mariah.
I know.
Yeah, definitely. But no, thank you for picking
this.
this.
Yeah, man, of course. What's next week?
Next week is Carnival of Souls.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Which is going to be fun to revisit.
I've only seen it once, so.
Yeah, and I was only introduced to it probably 2 or 3 years ago.
And same time period, right? That was 62.
Yep.
So.
Yeah.
Black and white.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool.
Awesome. All right.
All right. Till next time.